So CGMPs and 21 CFR. So current good manufacturing practices or CGMP, they're completely dynamic. They're established by the FDA and it sets the minimum standards. So ultimately, compliance with CGMPs equals quality products. And if not, your product is deemed to be not quality. So next we're going to FDA inspections. When we complete this part, we'll be able to discuss the FDA's inspection strategy and provide examples of what inspectors look for when inspecting a validated process. So, inspection strategy. You have activities that are organized as systems that are sets of operations and related activities. And then you have controls, which production meets intended safety, identity, strength, quality, and purity. So when you're doing inspections, ultimately you want to look at the organization, the personnel, or quality, facilities and equipment, the materials, production, packaging, and label, and laboratory control. So drilling when an auditor comes into a facility to do an inspection, they want to look at a lot of these different parts of the building or of a manufacturing area to make sure that they're in compliance and that if they're not, they give you what is called a warning letter or a 43, and they pretty much tell them that, hey, you have X amount of days to fix this, and if not, you can there'll be consequences, which can ultimately lead to you shutting down your facility. So when the production system is selected for coverage, in addition to the QS, areas listed below should be covered with respect to validation. So with respect to validation and FDA inspection, they want to see validation and verification of cleaning, sterilization of containers and closures. They want to see a process validation, including the security of computerized or automated processes, change controls, the need for validation evaluated, and then deviation management. So as far as validation, so your cleaning, sterilization, your process, is it validated correctly? Change controls, or had you documented need? If you had to do a revalidation, it needs to be documented correctly. And if you had any deviations that came out of your validation, did you document it correctly? Did you have good corrective actions, preventative actions, to prevent those issues from occurring again? So all these are looked at from a validation standpoint when it comes to an FDA inspection. So for each production system, firms should have written and approved procedures and documentation resulted therefrom. So as I've stated, if you took my BioWorks class, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So you need to make sure you have written and approved procedures and documentation, or ultimately you're not going to do well in your inspection. So this is a design flowchart for production and process controls. So this kind of just gives you, it's like a yes, no, you go through it. So for example, so let's say you start at the top, select the process for review. The next question is, was the sterilization process selected? If it's no, you keep going down, but if it's yes, then we need to evaluate the sterilization process according to the sterilization process controls chapter of the handbook. So this kind of just gives them a high-level overview on questions to ask and then what to review and what not to review. So I'm not going to go into it too much detail, but you can go through the slides to get an idea of what this is about. Next, we'll go into FDA enforcement. From this part, you'll list the various enforcement tools the FDA can use on manufacturers. We'll describe different types of inspection results, and then recognize the various warning letters and identify violations cited. So, as I stated earlier, if you don't do well in your inspection, the FDA has many enforcement tools such as warning letters, injunction, product seizure, import restrictions, clinical hold, delay in approval of new products and facilities, consent decree, rejection of application data, disqualification of clinical investigators, and criminal prosecution. So if you don't document or you don't follow the CGMPs, these are some enforcement tools that the FDA can use and they have used and will continue to use to ensure that the patient or is getting a quality product. So this is an overview of what the FDA has done as far as enforcement actions in 2009. So 2019, they had 257 arrests, 240 domestically and 8 foreign. They had 239 convictions, so they're proven guilty for doing something wrong. Um, so they collected, or at least fined, 2.3 billion in forfeiture, fines, and restitution, and 4,229 domain fees. So you can see the FDA does not play with any firm that does not follow CGMP. So it's very important to follow this, or you can ultimately be convicted of the crime, be arrested, have to pay large fines, and or your product being seized. So it's very important to follow those procedures. So when going through uh, FDA inspection results, you have different forms that they might give you. So Form 482 is a notice of inspection. That means if you get a Form 482, that means you're going to be inspected. And 483, this notifies management of server violations. So pretty much if the FDA comes, it does a inspection, and you get a Form 483, that means that's ultimately not good. That means you violated something and more likely you need to fix it. So if you do get a 483, they might give firm the opportunity to correct violations, but there is no legal obligation to warn them about additional enforcement actions. Then you have entitled letters. So this is not as significant as a warning letter. It does not warn that failure to correct violation will result in enforcement action. So not as significant, but still bad. Then you have your warning letter. So that means you have violations of regulatory significance. You have your injunction. This is when it gets bad. This is granted by a court to halt the flow of violative products. That means it's going to a court. You have temporary restraining order. Firm has opportunity to control the situation before flow of product is stopped. Preliminary injunction, a motion subject to a full hearing before court. Consent decree is a court order agreement between the FDA and a firm that outlines steps a firm needs to take to resume normal operation. So when you use a consent decree, you're pretty much shut down. You can't operate, and you have to fulfill a certain amount of requirements before you can get your consent decree lifted. So if you're in a consent decree, that is pretty bad because more likely there's a lot of money involved. And you pretty much cannot make any money. And then you have product seizure, which is judicial action for removing product from the market. So if you have a product seizure, all your product needs to be removed from the market because it's considered adulterated and not safe for human consumption. So process validation FDA 483 trends. So this gives us an example of a citation and a number of violations we had. So first citation is no procedures for production and process controls. In 04 to 010, that's 235. Then from 2012 to 18, 275. So it's going up. No procedures to prevent microbial contamination goes from 116 to 267. And then no validation of sterilization process from 79 to 113. So these are a number of 483s or observations. And it seems like it's going up. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know if it's a good thing that the FDA is catching more of it, or is it a bad thing that companies are not taking what they're doing very seriously. So you can look at it from good or bad, but ultimately there is still 483s being given out to ensure that the medicines we eat or use are quality.